Husband's been secretly working on a new life in another country with a woman he's been dating behind my back, and I'm saying the whole sentence out loud so it stops trying to tunnel under my ribs. I'm Eliza, I'm 36, and I'm an immigration case manager, which is a job that teaches you how to shepherd other people's departures with compassion and paperwork while never actually preparing you for the day you discover your own life has been quietly packing forms and practicing goodbyes without you. It didn't start with lipstick or perfume. It started with a password hint. Favorite city? My laptop asked after an update logged me out of our shared travel folder. My fingers typed a city we'd love together, Lisbon, and the screen thought about it the way a cat thinks about obeying. Incorrect. I tried Kyoto, the place we still say we'll visit when our knees have opinions. Incorrect. I tried Halifax because he once pretended to hate it and then cried by the harbor at sunset like a man auditioning for sincerity. Incorrect. I sat there with a mouthful of the kind of silence my job fills with stamps and staples. On a hunch, I typed Valparaiso, a name he'd said exactly once years ago in a bar with tile floors after we'd watched a travel documentary with so much pastel it felt illegal. Accepted. The folder opened like a polite wound. Inside, subfolders organized with a calm that felt like betrayal wearing linen: housing_v, banking_v, transit_v, language_v, health_v. V like the country code for Chile's 5th region or the name of a person. The last modified date was yesterday at 2:11 a.m., a time when he was either asleep beside me or, apparently, learning how to register for electricity in Spanish. My husband is Marco, 38, mechanical engineer, capable of fixing sinks and telling them they're brave. He likes lists and the illusion that lists are morality. He labels everything from spice jars to thoughts. He owns 3 kinds of tape. He kisses my forehead when he's sorry and my knuckles when he's tired. I'd once said, half joking, that he looked like a man who could build an entire life from a hardware store. Apparently he'd taken it as encouragement. I should explain that my days are full of other people's hope on letterhead. I help grad students extend their visas when a dissertation grows stubborn. I help entrepreneurs prove their businesses exist beyond a dream and a crisp pitch deck. I help families prove to invisible gates that love isn't a trick. I'm the kind of person who knows where your birth certificate is hiding and the difference between issued and endorsed. Irony doesn't just knock on my door, it sits at my kitchen counter and pours coffee. Under housing_v there were PDFs named in the unsexy way that promises seriousness: coito_lis_pdf, contrato_arriendo_draft2.kex, gastos_comunes_explainer.jpg. I opened one. Translation: a furnished apartment on a hill, 3 rooms, a balcony with a view that tourist sites photograph without shame. Start date in 8 weeks. Tenant: a name I knew intimately paired with a middle name I'd only seen on our marriage license. Co-tenant: Valentina Farias. V, of course. He'd even used his middle initial like a disguise that didn't change his face. I wanted to laugh because it was either that or scream. Language files were better organized than any New Year's resolution we'd ever made. Screenshots from a language app, streaks of 30, 60, 90 days. Buen trabajo, Marco, confetti all over my kitchen table. Segments highlighted: arrenda, mudanza, cuenta vista, words you don't learn for vacation. There were voice notes, his voice practicing vowels with an intimacy I didn't know how to forgive. Donde está la station, he said, and somewhere in my body I knew he wasn't asking me. The banking folder housed transfers and amounts that didn't look like guilt. They looked like living: first month's rent, security deposit, necessities, utils, internet. A new account opened at a Chilean bank, a proxy address listed at a co-working space. He'd always teased me for being the paperwork one. The audacity of him assigning "I've got this" to my entire skill set while he built an exit with a precision I would have admired if it hadn't been eating my life. You want to know about the woman? We'll get there. I didn't go hunting. She introduced herself like a caption. The first night I didn't confront him. He came home with takeout and a face full of traffic. He kissed me like a man who trusts habit to do the heavy lifting. He asked about my day and actually listened. That's the thing about people who are leaving, sometimes they get good at staying in order to soften the angle. I told him about the PhD whose recommendation letter spelled her last name two different ways because the universe has a sense of humor. He told me about a pump housing that refused to be persuaded by promises alone. We ate noodles and watched a documentary about women who build violins out of maple like patience, and I didn't say, "Hey, I met your new life in a folder." When he fell asleep, I went back to the desk. There was a document in Health_V titled Seguro_ Valentina. I opened it because I also hate myself, apparently. Her date of birth. Her passport number. Her surname, which meant I could find her if I wanted to. A photo, low-res but stubborn, of a woman on a seaside walkway holding a plastic bag of cherries like they were proof of a good decision. She had the sort of smile that could convince you to move chairs before thunderstorms. And then I saw the metadata I hadn't been looking for because I hadn't needed it in years. File author, Marco Reyes. Last modified by, Valentina F. We were co-authoring my absence. The next day I did what my clients do when their lives are about to be decided by men in suits they'll never meet. I made a list titled Knowns and Unknowns. Known, chili. Lease. V, a plan bigger than a fling. Unknown, whether he'd planned to tell me, whether telling me would be a courtesy or a confession, whether I would become a villain in a narrative he'd been rehearsing in Spanish. I went to work because the great trick of grief is that coffee still expects to be ground and buses keep coming. My office is in a building where hallways smell like disinfectant and determination. The first person I met was a young man who'd crossed 2 borders and 3 languages to stand in front of me with a folder full of hope. I helped him untangle a bureaucratic knot because that's what my hands know how to do. Around noon I caught myself translating mudanza for him, and the word move got caught in the hinge of my jaw. I excused myself, locked the bathroom stall, and practiced breathing like my therapist taught me when my father died. 4 in, box 4 out. I counted tiles. I talked to my own reflection like a client I liked. You have time, I said. You also have rage. Both are paperwork. After work I didn't go home. I went to the library because libraries hold people the way life should. I looked up her name not because I didn't believe him, I hadn't even given him a chance to show me his lies yet, but because I needed a silhouette to hate. Valentina worked at a small gallery near the port. She curated a show last year called Ordinary Light, and I wanted to be furious at the title and couldn't be because I could see from photos that she'd hung clotheslines with photographs clipped to them, and the crowd had the look of citizens who felt seen without irony. Her bio was short. Valparaiso-born, studied art history, believes in trains, salt, and second chances. Trains. I almost laughed. The universe had a word of the day calendar going and she'd stolen mine. I didn't sleep much. In the morning, Marco wrapped his arms around me and said, "Weekend trip? We could go upstate and pretend we like hiking," and I said, "Sure," because sometimes you say yes to get through breakfast. I had to choose how to confront him. I've sat across from enough people in life or death rooms to know that theatrics can make you feel powerful and accomplish nothing. I printed the lease, the bank transfers, the health document with her name blacked out like the world's pettiest censor bar. I laid them on the kitchen table like placemats. I made coffee. I waited. He came in from a run smelling like earnestness and eucalyptus and that particular outdoor air that follows you in as if it has an appointment. He stopped at the table. He saw the papers. He did a face I've only ever seen on people in courtrooms when they decide whether to tell the truth. He Saturday. He did not reach for them. "Okay," he said, and the breath that came with it told me he'd rehearsed this word even if he hadn't rehearsed this moment. "When were you going to tell me?" I asked, and the question sounded smaller than my body. "Next week," he said. When it felt safe. Then he laughed at himself because even he heard how a sentence can be cowardly and accurate at once. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. I don't know how to do this well." "You built an apartment in another country in a folder you named like a scavenger hunt," I said, and I wasn't proud of the way my voice wanted to be clever. He looked at the papers like they were pets he had to surrender. "I met Valentina during a work trip," he said. "The one in March to Santiago, when the company tried to convince us everyone can bond with empanadas. She was with a friend who sells textiles to one of our clients. We talked about ships and cranes because her father worked at the port, and then we talked about hillside elevators and the way cities hold themselves together even when they're falling apart. It felt like someone had translated me into a language you didn't need a visa for. He breathed. I imagined stamping his sentence received. We kept talking, he said. I told myself I was practicing Spanish. Then I told myself I was practicing being alive. I started counting my days by the time difference between us. Were you seeing her behind my back on your other trips? I asked plain. Yes, he said. Twice. I told myself I would tell you when I knew if it was an affair or a life. It became a life faster than I expected, and I kept not telling you because every day I didn't tell you I got to keep a version of myself I liked better. Did you sleep with her? I said, and there's no good way to ask that question and still feel like a person with elbows. Yes, he said again, and though I had not been sitting, I felt the sensation of standing up anyway in the body. I am not going to make this into a romance novel, he added before I could despise him. I'm telling you I did it. I'm also telling you it made me hate the part of me that could lie to you and still sleep. Did you plan to leave me regardless of whether I agreed? I asked. I needed the grammar of certainty. I was planning to ask you for a separation, he said. He paused, and you could hear the sentence choosing which cliff to jump off. I thought maybe you would want to come with me. He looked at me then, like a man who has set a table for an apology and invited a fantasy. I thought maybe you'd love it there. I thought we'd walk up and down hills and get lost and say we meant to. I told myself the cruelty of not asking was kinder than the insult of asking too late. This was the moment in some story where the betrayed flips the table or throws a mug. In my story, I put a hand flat on the lease to feel the fiber of the paper. You were going to tell me next week, I said. After the deposit. After the health insurance. After your Spanish learned the words for utility bill and the subway. After you had a life so real my only choice would be to bless it or be the villain. Yes, he said. The truth is a choreography you don't do by accident. I am not asking you to bless it, he added quietly. I am asking you to allow me to be someone who did this, and then I am asking what you want now that you know. It's hard to describe the flavor of grief that comes with being given the microphone after the concert. I wanted to say 1,000 things. Only one sentence came out. I want you to tell her I exist. He swallowed. She knows, he said, and that had some kind of pity in it that made my teeth hurt. She told me to tell you months ago. I said I would. She told me not to move forward until I did. I said I wouldn't. I did. She is not the part of me that lied. Don't you dare outsource your ethics, I said, and my voice got sharp in a way that finally felt like me. We made a schedule for talking to lawyers because I refused to play divorce on hard mode. We made a schedule for sleeping in separate rooms because the body, for all its heroism, appreciates signage. I told him I would not be giving him an answer on anything until we sat in a room with a third party who gets paid to witness. He nodded like a student who knows the homework is his soul. I called my mother after he left for work because mothers have a way of turning your worst day into something you can hold without it burning you immediately. I told her everything except the parts that would make her hire a private investigator out of retirement. She got quiet in that way that meant her blood pressure was imposing boundaries. Do you love him? She asked finally, and it felt like a trick. Yes, I said, because love is not a coupon that expires when someone misspells your name. Do you love yourself? She asked, and I said, I'm working on it. I booked us with a therapist named Inez who had a penchant for shoes with complicated straps and metaphors that still had warranty. In the first session, Inez asked us to speak only in present tense for 5 minutes. I feel like a house that was sublet without my permission, I said. I feel like a person who found a door in his own life and keeps petting the frame, he said. I feel like every immigrant I've ever helped, except my suitcase is invisible, I said. I want to stop auditioning, he said. We took turns saying I'm sorry, not like a spell but like a receipt. Inez wrote 3 words on the whiteboard: harm, repair, choice. Which one are we doing today? She asked. Repair was too optimistic, harm was too stale. We chose choice because action is the only thing that notices time. You're waiting for Valentina again. She wrote to me 2 weeks later because Marco told her he'd told me and because the internet is a system for reducing distances nobody asked to shrink. The subject line was my name. The body began, I am not writing to persuade you. I wanted to hate her instantly. My body stood up for me and said, we can also be curious. She was more careful than I expected. He told me you are good and I believe him, she wrote. I told him I wouldn't be with a man who cannot fix his life in daylight. I am sorry for the part of your pain that results from my part of the story, even as I am not ashamed of loving him. My thumb hovered over reply. I typed, I am not a petition you need to address. I deleted it. I typed, thank you for not asking me to be anything for you. I deleted it. In the end, I didn't write back because unanswered is also an answer and I was busy learning to sleep. People always ask, did he choose you or did you choose yourself? The true thing is that every day for months we both chose and you chose a dozen times before breakfast. We tried the separation for real. He moved into a short-term rental with furniture that made him look small. Friends came with lasagna and opinions. My sister took me to a boxing class where I hit a heavy bag and cried into my gloves while a woman named Danny told me to keep my wrist straight. My clients kept needing me to be a person with a stapler and a spine. Life didn't ask me if now was a good time to continue. I flew to Santiago once for work before any decisions hardened. It's not as poetic as it sounds. I went because a partner agency we use needed training and because the universe enjoys a narrative arc, so there I was in the very country whose folders had been undoing me. I did not go to Valparaiso. I stood in the airport watching arrivals and thought about all the people I shepherded through gates while my own life teetered on descriptions. I practiced a sentence I didn't know I'd say until it landed in my mouth with soft certainty. I don't want to be the person who follows you to be brave. When I got home, I told him I wanted a divorce. He looked like someone had just turned off a light he didn't know he'd been borrowing. He didn't argue. He didn't promise romance or reinvention. He said okay the way he said it the first day, except this time the word belonged to the truth and not to the beginning of a story he'd built elsewhere. He cried. I did too. We sat on the back steps and watched our neighbor's cat stalk a leaf like it was important. The paperwork was brutal and boring in equal measure. We divided the decent plates from the emotional ones. We sold the couch that had held 1,000 naps and one decisive conversation. He took his mother's plant and I kept the bookshelf our friends had carried up the stairs during a snowstorm. We found a lawyer who didn't wear his beliefs like cologne. I put my signature on papers I could have drafted in my sleep for someone else and somehow could barely line up for myself. On the day we filed, he texted, I'm at the park, and I walked there because I was done with doors. We hugged like people who know what they are to each other and what they are not. I'm going, he said. I know, I said. We didn't say the words good luck because sometimes those are just 2 syllables of cowardice. We said take care, and I meant it the way you do when a person you love is going to stand in line at a consulate with his heart in his hands. He left in late spring. I watched him pack quietly, the way people do when they are trying not to startle their own hope. He gave me spare keys I no longer needed. He took a picture of the kitchen table without me in it. He apologized to the walls, which was both ridiculous and appropriate. And then he was gone, carrying a carry-on, a backpack, and a new set of verbs. 2 months later, I got a postcard of a city with more stairs than sense. The elevators are older than my excuses, he wrote. I am learning to call hills by their names. He said Valentina was kind in the way people are when they don't want to pretend kindness is exceptional. He said the apartment had a balcony where stray cats held meetings. He didn't say I miss you. He didn't have to. Some absences are baked into ink. You want to know if I'm okay? People do. They ask like I'm a national park after a wildfire. I am not okay in that photogenic, triumphant way. I am okay like a person with a good therapist, a group chat, and a plant that finally forgave me for overwatering. I run sometimes badly. I learned to make a soup that tastes like I meant it. I joined a pottery class because clay is honest even when you lie to it. I started saying no with less negotiation. I started saying yes to versions of my life that didn't require a passport or a man's orbit to be interesting. I still work with people who need my hands to turn their fear into piles of accepted. I am gentler with the ones who confuse movement with magic. I tell them when it's appropriate that sometimes the bravest choice is to stay and make where you are kinder. I tell them when appropriate that leaving is not inherently a betrayal, it's a verb you owe things to. I never tell them my story unless the room needs proof that the person holding the stapler has also bled. Last week, a client hugged me after her interview went well. She smelled like citrus and relief. "Are you married?" she asked, not as a test, just as a human inventory. "I was," I said. "And now I am me." She nodded like I'd handed her an address. "That's good too," she said. I believed her. Sometimes at 10 p.m., I stand on my own tiny balcony and listen to the city be rude to sleep. I picture him on his balcony many latitudes south, listening to a different set of sirens, a different brand of laughter, a different kettle. I picture Valentina bringing home cherries and him learning the word for pit. I feel a tug in my chest that is not entirely sorrow. It is recognition. We were both immigrants in the end, he just crossed more time zones. There is a version of this story where we meet again in some port city and confess we were children, and there is a version where we never speak and that silence is the kindest thing we ever did for each other. The version I'm living is quieter than both. I have a friend over for dinner and we eat pasta heavy with lemon and garlic, and I tell her the joke about the visa officer who admired my client's shoes so much she forgot to be terrifying. I fall asleep in a bed that fits me like an honest sentence. I wake up and water the plant that refuses drama. I walk to work and say good morning to the building because buildings deserve it. I help a nurse renew her status and a poet prove he belongs here, and a family who can recite their children's birthdays in 3 languages because love has a head for numbers. If you're where I was, staring at a folder you didn't know existed and realizing it has your name on it in invisible ink, this is the only practical advice I have. Make 2 lists, one titled What's True and one titled What I Want to Be True. Let them sit on the table. Drink water. Call someone who will bring soup without asking if you're hungry. Don't confuse your ability to organize for your obligation to endure. Remember that you can be kind without being a door. Learn one new small skill that your old life didn't have room for. Forgive yourself for laughing at something silly on a day you thought you'd only cry. And when the idea of a future starts to sound less like thunder and more like weather, let yourself plan tiny trips to places you can actually go: the park, the library, the friend who needs help assembling a chair. This morning I clipped a postcard to my fridge, not the one he sent, but one from a museum gift shop with a painting of waves that look like secrets finally tired of their own drama. Under it I stuck a note in my handwriting: "You are not an application to be approved." I ate toast that I burned slightly and didn't apologize to. I left for work and held the door open for a stranger whose arms were full of boxes labeled fragile, and we laughed because everything is, and then we both kept walking, which is how life keeps picking itself up, border or no border, permission or no permission, heartbreak or no heartbreak, toward the next room that needs a kind of truth we can carry.